With that, I want to get right into the conversation. I enjoyed our session yesterday. I felt like we could have kept rolling right through lunch, so I want to give us as much time as possible for this morning's first session, Deals and Directions, a forum on licensing and negotiation. And I'd like to welcome our director, Lanette Garza, up to the podium to introduce her speakers and get this kicked off.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's been a pleasure speaking to so many of you all one-on-one in person, getting to know everyone, fielding some questions about licensing, which I'm thrilled to be doing this time at this meeting. And it's a privilege to share a brief snapshot of the vibrant and impactful work going on with licensing. CRL's licensing program is not simply a service. It's our collective voice in action. It's a place for collective advocacy, providing tangible value and strategic leverage for access to e-resources. By working together to secure fairer pricing and drive progress towards more open and sustainable scholarly resources. And how do we do that? Today, I want to spotlight the two pillars in which CRL licensing does that. First is CRL's global licensing program. It's designed to provide access to critical cultural heritage resources, newspapers, humanities, materials, primary sources, and more. These collections may not be easily accessible or may be out of reach for individual institutions due to cost, or we may be able to negotiate together for those types of resources. To give you an example, 42 institutions now subscribe to Coherent Digital. 24 institutions subscribe to Dar al-Manduma, and 647 institutions subscribe to institutions and consortia subscribe to the New York Times. 105 subscribe to the History Makers. So this speaks volumes to the scale and shared value we're creating together through global licensing e-resources. The NERL program, by contrast, focuses on the critical resources coming from major commercial publishers and STEM providers. With more than 100 agreements in place, NERL is a licensing force, but it's also a values-based collective. What I've consistently witnessed in NERL negotiations with publishers is a profound commitment to advocacy. These negotiation teams do not advocate on behalf of a single institution. They advocate on behalf of the consortia. They carry forward shared core values, not individual preferences. They ask hard questions. They hold publishers accountable, and they demand better from these publishers. And it's not just for lower cost, although lower cost is usually a deal breaker in these negotiations. But we ensure licensing reflects our community's core values. This commitment has yielded transformative results. We've seen powerful change, not just in pricing, but in pushing for greater transparency, equitable terms, and more inclusive access models. In NERL, we discuss things like AI, supplier diversity. We discuss things like streaming media. We push the boundaries in order to create change through NERL. So building on core licensing areas, let me provide just a very brief highlights and just touching the surface here on what we've done just very recently. So just this past year, we revised and relaunched the CRL model license. And if you haven't seen our model license, I really encourage you to go to the website under our resources and tools and utilize and look at that model license. And although it's up to the discretion of the institution to utilize that model license, it's a very valuable resource. This was a collaborative and collective effort to re-update that model license. We got the feedback of our members and we updated that model license. We utilize it just on almost every agreement. We also initiated our first one-time group purchasing program with ProQuest in the fall. It resulted in a 55% discount and nearly $1 million in savings across 22 institutions. And the momentum continues. We did that again in the spring with Adam Matthews and resulted in almost the same results. And we're midstream with Coherent Digital. So looking ahead, we are actively increasing our open access agreements with growing publisher partnerships such as Springer Nature, Elsevier, MIT Direct to Open, PLOS, Cambridge University Press, Annual Reviews, and Bio1. Yes, with their faults, but trying to push the needle. And last but not least, we're deeply committed to helping our members with accessibility, working to ensure all licensed content complies with CAG 2.1. Again, yes, with faults, but ensuring that our members are compliant, our providers are compliant. So as we face major challenges, much of those that Heather Joseph spoke to in her presentation, we need to critically reflect on the path ahead. How do we want CRL licensing to evolve? Where do we see the most value? We've had some of these conversations in Neural Program Council with our CRL members. And where can licensing do better? We know we can do better. We ask our publishers, right? We demand better. So to help ground and further our conversation, I am honored to introduce 3 colleagues that I can speak volumes to on how they've helped, but I know we have only so much time. They've been instrumental in shaping CRL and Neural's licensing work over the years and in various ways. Liz Mengel from Johns Hopkins University, Jeff Carroll at Rutgers University, and Christian Dupont at Boston College. So please join me in welcoming Liz, Jeff, and Christian.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm going to kind of give a brief history of Neural through my participation in it, especially for those of you who may not know Neural. So JHU has been a Neural member since, I think, 2022, 2023, when it was still at Yale. We've been a CRL member since, we've been a Neural member since 2003, 2002, 2003, and a CRL member since 2022, 2023. I've been the JHU rep to Neural since 2006 and was actually on the committee that chose CRL as the home for Neural back in 2013, and believe me, there wasn't a lot of options. But we thought we found a really good home with CRL. I've done many roles within Neural, from serving as chair of the program council, which was Neural's executive board, to a lead negotiator, to a team member, and hopefully as a trusted colleague to my other Neural colleagues. Through this kind of long and winding road, there have been, of course, many changes. It's like I've been, since we started creating the big deals, to now when we're analyzing how to break the big deals up. So echoing Jake's 100 problems, solve the 7 that you can, and then kind of move on. I think that's how Neural approached the licensing that we've done. There's been a lot of changes in how we've worked through some really awful license terms over the course of these however many years I've been doing this. For example, one of the things we worked at that seems so common now is to get institutional logos within the content that you purchase. Another thing we worked at was getting ads out of content that we purchase, with the conversation with vendors. Well, if you're going to put ads in there, my faculty and students are going to see, I want a portion of that ad revenue returned to me. So we do try to hold them accountable for things. And now you don't really see ads in most of the content that we buy. In addition, I think we spent a really, 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 really long time with Elsevier's international ILL language. That was horrible. The things we had to do, the hoops we had to jump through to get that language out of the licenses was just crazy. I was on the Springer Nature negotiating team since before Springer and Nature were merged, up until the recent read and publish agreement that we did. How many years ago was that? 3?
Just 2.
2 or 3 years ago. So a long, long time dealing with Springer Nature. In 2020, along with colleagues from Duke, Maryland, Cornell, Dartmouth, Yale, and Stanford, we did a study for then incoming President Greg Yao on how to better integrate neural and CRL. We highlighted the need for changes in governance, communications, funding and fees, developing a roadmap for integration, which then Educopia picked up in 2022. We also stressed the need for more robust integration with CRL staff. Up until then, it really was maybe 1.5 people supporting neural and all the in-kind work from the neural members. For JHU, I can say neural is an essential part of our acquisition strategy. Without neural, I would have to hire at least maybe 1.5 more people to do the kind of work that we're getting through neural. The bulk of our journal packages are handled through neural. And I think one of the things that neural brings to the negotiations is when we meet with publishers, we are not just the voice of one institution. We are the voice of 30 very strong institutions. So when I think of neural, there are a few words that always come to me: collaboration, collective action, and relationships. And I think those are all 3 words that were part of the themes we've been hearing so far. So in the exercise that Lanette's going to have you all do in a little bit, she wanted to talk about, what should we start doing? What should we continue doing? What should we maybe stop? So starting, I would say the work we need to do in licensing, especially around TDM and AI, is going to be essential. Those have been kind of hard to get in a lot of licenses, and it's important that we all stand up together to publishers and say that this is just part of research. It's not anything new, it's not anything fancy, it is part of the way people do research. So continue, probably, bringing in more area studies content. This is just solely me being selfish. I look to neural to be area studies, so I don't have to start doing that. And as terms of stopping, I talked to Jake about this the other day, so I don't feel bad about saying it out loud, but I still think there's ways that we need to kind of integrate the membership and fee structure for everyone. I'd also like to see neural growing its membership beyond the 30 core. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, now that you know the history.
And I'm going to steal your mic.
Of course.
Hi, Jeff Carroll. I'm the Director of Collection Strategies at Rutgers University Libraries. Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. I'm going to go a little bit more specific on the background from Rutgers' perspective, but with the intention of showing or demonstrating what CRL and neural does for an R1 institution. But I'm going to ease into it by starting with, I've listed 2 top priorities for the coming year. Number 1 is to stay within budget. I say that only partly tongue-in-cheek. We do have our budget set for FY26. Our collections budget, it looks like, is going to be okay, not so much the operations budget. But I still have to build in contingency for uncertainty. In the pandemic year, 2020, we faced an unexpected budget cut in the middle of the cycle. I almost expect there's a 50% chance that that could happen this coming year. So a lot of uncertainty around that. And then number 2, continue to move the dial on OA. Rutgers went all in on read and publish or transformative agreements. We have 20 such agreements so far. We're still negotiating others. And of the agreements we have in place, we have all 3 of the biggest STEM publishers, Elsevier, Wiley, and Springer. Springer was the one agreement of those 3 negotiated through neural. Liz and I both served on the negotiating team for that. I thought it was only 2 years ago, but I failed to put in the whole year that we spent negotiating up until the time it became active. I think, our strategy, transformative agreements are not the end game in this. They're flawed, they're very flawed, but it moves the dial, And I got to say, being in these read and publish agreements, we have a very concrete way of demonstrating return on investment. We can just multiply the number of articles published in these agreements times the amount of APCs that our authors did not have to pay. That's not an ideal setup, but at least we can demonstrate to the university the value of these. As part of our overall contracting, negotiating, and licensing strategy at Rutgers, Rutgers belongs to a number of consortia, including PALCI, NEURL, the Big Ten Academic Alliance, Lyrasis, VAIL, which is a New Jersey statewide alliance, as well as several others. NEURL is the only one that I'm aware of that pulls together members from across the consortium to serve on negotiating teams, as both Liz and Lanette talked about, primarily for the largest contracts. In doing so, it draws on the experience and expertise from across the membership. It gives members direct input into the terms being negotiated and provides direct feedback on progress in negotiation to members serving on those teams. And then the teams themselves, the members of the teams, update the rest of the membership on progress. I'm wondering if this is a model that could be expanded across CRL because I feel like it works so well within NEURL. Lanette highlighted the model licensing agreement. There was a period of time, a number of years, probably too long, where there was a separate model license agreement under NEURL and a model license agreement under CRL. But those have been merged, thankfully. Licensing is a time-consuming activity. Some negotiations, as I mentioned with the Springer Nature negotiation can take a year or more, and sometimes even after a year into it, they can fail. So it's very helpful to have an organization like CRL and NEURL to turn to and leverage in these negotiations, and also to have a model license agreement available. It gives us something to point to when negotiating directly with publishers and vendors. It helps establish consistency in what the academic and research library community is asking for, consistency in both language and in terms. And I think it's extremely important for CRL, NEURL to continue to maintain and revise a single model license agreement. Through its negotiating teams and model license agreement, NEURL has essentially brought together a community of experts in licensing who can be consulted when questions arise when we're negotiating on our own. Just to characterize the scale, some of you may be directly involved with this, many may not be. The scale of licensing activity at any given research institution likely number in the hundreds to a couple thousands of active license agreements at any given time. Things are constantly changing, new terms being introduced, new interpretations of existing terms, which makes it currently, in order to figure out the impact of changes or new interpretations to existing terms, we should be reviewing manually, one by one, all of our existing agreements to determine what the impact is. That's not practical. So I am wondering whether there's an opportunity for CRL. Is it the right place to explore more automated means of searching across common terms in our existing license agreements? Even if it were just 100 that NEURL handles, it would be very helpful to be able to do this in an automated way. Maybe AI is an answer there.
Because we have to say AI early in the morning.
Yes, right. We got the AI out of the way, right? Right.
Check that off on your
Right.
bingo card.
And then, I mentioned before that Rutgers belongs to 6, 8, maybe 10 different consortia. How do we make a choice on which one to go with when faced with these options? Basically, it comes down to the best deal, as Lanette mentioned. But we also look at what's giving us the most leverage and whether the deal is exclusive with a given consortia or not. I would say that CRL, of course, gives us access to content we would not otherwise be able to acquire on our own, and I think just the global licensing model is one example of that. But quantifying the return on investment for the things we get through CRL has been difficult. It's been easier to do through Neural because we can give a value in savings in staff time as well as a savings in what we've negotiated for. CRL, it's a challenge, and so we've got to figure out how to address that challenge and be better at articulating the value that CRL gives us. I'd like to flip around on licensing to a different aspect that I've been dealing with, and this is a very time-consuming process, is that we're often approached by for-profit publishers who are interested in our stuff. CRL also has similar stuff that I'm sure they're interested in. If it gets this material digitized, I'm happy to make an agreement with a for-profit publisher or vendor as long as we can negotiate certain benefits on that, either gratis access to the content. We really want to make sure we have a preservation strategy that's paid for by the publisher or vendor. And I wonder if CRL would be a good place to have discussions around what we all should be asking for in these cases and what CRL might ask for if approached by these vendors. And then finally, I'd just like to bring up one thing about Neural in name itself. It's not clear to me whether Neural now just means Neural, and I don't know what that means, or if it still means Northeast Research Libraries Consortium. If the latter, I think it's time to figure something else out. It's no longer based in the Northeast. It no longer just includes Northeast institutions, and this is not without precedent. PALC used to stand for Pennsylvania Academic Library Consortium, kept its same letters, but now stands for Partnership for Academic Library Collaboration and Innovation. I just put out there that we need to clarify this, and it would be a more welcoming thing for institutions looking to join. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks to both Liz and Jeff for diving into that history of Neural and the specific and practical activities that Neural members and just what licensing is about. I'm going to, in my part, to help set up and seed our discussion, kind of step back a little bit, more general things. And the point I want to make here, and I think you've already done this in some ways here, but you know, with all the discussion about Neural, and I'm hearing from CRL members, well, licensing, that's just that part of CRL that Neural does, right? But the point here, and I think you've already reminded us of this and think about our discussion, is that licensing in CRL is a pervasive activity. It's very important in every aspect of building and serving collections. It's just a part of our libraries and our life. When we think about what licensing is, it's grants of privileges, right, that get structured into agreements that then and those agreements are what structure relationships and provide mutual benefits. Licensing is just, it's a human activity, okay? And it's something that's part of everything that we do. We may not think about it in that way, but maybe we want to think about those implicit ways in which this activity is happening and then how it's supported in explicit ways through CRL and our member activities. So my way into this, I'll spend a couple minutes into that and then talk about some general questions that have come to me here. So this is actually my first CRL meeting representing Boston College or any other library that I work for, so I'm pleased to be here and learning an awful lot and don't have that deep history of Neural either. My background is not as an acquisitions librarian or a licensing librarian, but like several of you in the room, come through the rare book special collections and archives management side in very practical ways, which I continue to do at Boston College. It's great to find good company in the room here. We heard from Jennifer Osorio yesterday and how her role has evolved there at UCLA. Lisa Carter, right? You started as a media librarian in Kentucky, I think, back when we known each other through special collections, and now you're running the University of Michigan libraries. Beth Whitaker and I were catching up at Kansas and still have a hand in distinctive collections. David Pavlich there at Wisconsin, a career path that's a bit like mine, where in the last couple of years, as their administrative team changes, I'm now, my activities are threaded across collections. So I'm the AUL for scholarly resources and Burns Library, and so managing our Burns Library activities. So that's my my way into CRL, which feels very much at home to me, and I'm sure there are others of you who bring that distinctive collections background and its intersection with area studies, and it's just an exciting thing because, this is part of it too, is that, libraries are about building collections. If we're not doing that in some way and serving collections, we're not really library organizations anymore. So I think keeping that, even in the perspective of licensing, okay, we're not just a CRL, a buying club, okay? There are other organizations who can do this. It's that member engagement on building collections, and the licensing is a complement and a foundation for that. So despite not having this real background, somehow last year, I'm looking at Lanette, and she may know more of the backstory, but I was appointed actually to be the chair of a new structure within NERL, and that's the steering committee. These are governance changes that you've alluded to, okay? So, and as Liz explained, CRL, NERL's been defining itself as a program progressively. There's been a lot of governance discussions. So there's a program council, which are those 30 core NERL members. It's an all-in council. They have monthly calls, and that leads them very effectively. Those split out in the negotiation teams. The newer structure, okay, was not having what used to be an executive board within, okay, which couldn't exist within CRL because CRL is a one membership organization, but clarifying a steering committee, which is supposed to, steer and to help navigate and communicate the program council work with the leadership team, and then through the leadership team and directly with the board. So this was actually the first year that we've had a functioning steering committee. I mean, it was kind of in process getting appointed, and once the those governance changes were recommended and implemented through NERL. So it's been exciting. You're trying to figure out what our mission is within NERL, but then with CRL, and again, very stimulating. So I'm finishing my term here as of June 30th. Ardis Cosbiel, who's the Associate University Librarian for Content Strategies and Assistant Librarian for Faculty of Arts and Science at Harvard. A terrific colleague, Martha. I'm really enjoying it. She's taking over as a steering committee chair. Virginia Martin, who's been the program council chair and an ex officio member of the steering committee. The steering committee is only 3 of our appointed members, and then the executive staff of CRL, leaving and then Amori Serrano, who's the head of collection strategy at Yale, will be coming on as the new program council and ex officio member. So that's kind of NERL steering committee within CRL. And that's the background for saying that I think that what the big question that we can talk about here, and which NERL provides a lens on, is how should CRL develop and allocate its licensing resources, that program that you manage within CRL, Lanette, which is not just NERL, and its staffing and its expertise to serve the various licensing needs of all of CRL members, okay? And so the questions here has sort of been alluded to. Is NERL going to remain a stable core? NERL doesn't necessarily mean Northeast anymore, but nobody's been able to join. It's been an elite club, 30 core members. There's some structuring of fees that's going on now. I think most people are aware, but unless you're not a member of NERL, but for NERL, this has been really important. NERL fees are going up, finally. They should, to sustain the operations, okay? But coming at a bad time, so there's been a lot of Sturm und Drang in the NERL core community. Some of those NERL members are not CRL members presently. And, I will speak for myself in this as an outgoing chair that I think this is a really important thing to bring, if you're going to be a NERL program participant, an on-ramp to become a full CRL member, and to embrace that and all its values is the way to go. I think providing some time and some structure around that will be very important. These are major institutions: BU, Brown, GWU, Georgetown, Howard, MIT, and Syracuse. And Jake's working really hard to talk with them about that. And this is, it's an equity thing, right? Because, of course, in this binational organization, Canadian members can't be members of NERL. That's the publishers don't write agreements that way. So, of course, you have CRKN or the Réseau Canadien de Documentation pour la Recherche, okay, and this binational and bilingual, we hope, organization as well. But, and CRKN gets really good deals. In fact, some of our folks are kind of jealous at times at Boston College. They wish we could do as well as the Canadians do. So again, there's a lot we can do in sharing expertise. And so this is, licensing at CRL is not just all about NERL, okay? And that's a point we want to really keep in mind here. Okay, so and in fact was, as already discussed here, the CRL budget yesterday, adds more licensing resources across the board. So a data analyst, the unsub, as we think about licensing, it's always a moving target. We think we're getting the model license agreement, always terms to update, or what are our publishers doing? It's very important for us to keep in mind that publishers are engaging in their own licensing activities to create the products that they're licensing to us, okay? And so meeting them, in that kind of space of understanding their licensing strategies and motivations, and then meeting them with ours. And that's where that deep expertise comes in. And having staff whose full-time job it is at CRL to keep on top of this is really important. And then to engage and to provide professional development for those of us who participate as members, whether you're from NERL or other organizations. I think that's just a unique aspect of what CRL does and offers. And I hope not just, again, NERL, but finding more ways to expand that group. Now, one of the challenges, of course, of 200 CRL members, okay? There's no publisher organization that's going to kind of say, I want to do a deal with, with 200. Now, we can offer scale, like that's where they have the NERL affiliates, and we have 100, and some of those are not CRL members, obviously. They can pay fees in. They can take the deal that's on the table, much like other buying consortia. That's great. I think it's important to continue doing. I'm not sure, it's not really our core activity. Again, this is more me speaking here to think about what can we best do in allocating our CRL resources to support core member activities around licensing. But maybe, there is multiple groups. This is something to think about, right? So NERL's been the one core group of 30, and that's a manageable size for certain publishers to deal with. Similar R1 type institutions will do a deal with you, okay? But are there other constellations or configurations of CRL members that could be brought into licensing groups and conversations or negotiating teams, okay? And here we get into that more general question, and this will wrap up, is the informing how does this experience and expertise inform the overall work that CRL does? Okay, so thinking about, and this is the next topic here, right? Kevin and the collections strategies here, right? So it was already alluded, could we do other kinds of licensing activities? Well, already like the Global News Archives or News Bank, where digitization happened. Those were things that happened to build, collections. And I think, frankly, that's maybe complicated in its own ways, but simply this transition, from the AMPs to the GCCs is a little bit like the transition that NERL's been going through as a program of CRL. Okay, there are fee structures around that. There's making sure that, I guess the GCC members will be CRL members on that, okay? And not necessarily affiliates, that there's a due structure to that. But the secret sauce is, that's a term that gets used a lot in NERL, right, is that member involvement, direct member involvement that you highlighted so well, isn't Jeff, in those negotiations. And just like it's a parallel activity and style of CRL, like with the GCCs. And I think that's something to just keep in mind that, in terms of our style as an organization. And then even, Amy, the metadata and discoveries aspects of that too. I mean, this is what, to make a licensable product, and even metadata comes up to licensing terms, right? And discovery platforms for understanding how licensing terms apply to collections is really important. Okay, so I think that, with that, I've already mentioned the idea that that vendors are already engaged in their own licensing, and this is a term that we can meet them on. They're very tough negotiations, and that's where collective work and collaborative work is really important. Again, just underscoring that licensing is really, I see it, a pervasive activity in CRL, something that really informs our character, and the style with which we approach it says, what CRL is, as distinct from other organizations that engage in licensing activities and consortia that we belong to. So I hope that's helpful with everything else to seed our discussion. And Lanette? Yeah, Liz, go ahead.
I just want to add that I think if publishers can write deals with whole countries, they can write deals with more than 30 people. So I think there's a lot we can push back there.
Good, okay.
Thank you all so much. I think you characterized very well the history, specifics, and some of the challenges, and especially the governance piece very well. So again, thank you so much. On your tables, much like yesterday, you have a prompt: licensing, start, stop, continue. And so we'd appreciate your feedback in tables for about, I think there's enough time for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have a short feedback before a coffee break. So thank you all very much.
I think we're back on now. Janet, you want to kick things off?
Hi again. This is Janet Bishop again. Nice to see you all on the second day from the Claremont Colleges. Our table, maybe other tables have this distinction, but none of the colleagues at our table, none of our institutions are members of NERL. So, our question was framed, I framed the question, how should CRL structure its licensing services to serve all members, or if that was of interest? I think, one of the themes we had goes back to yesterday's theme of even getting the word out about what CRL does in terms of licensing. I think this was a revelation to some, just learning about NERL, so it was appreciated. There's also a question, though, about cost, and also a question about how to balance CRL's licensing with the other, I won't use the term buyers club, but consortial purchasing organizations that we belong to. The list is GWILA, BTAA, Marley, Carly, Skelk. So where does CRL fit in this constellation, and can there be a value add specifically from CRL? I'll use a personal example. From Claremont, we are both members of GWILA and Skelk. Skelk is our principal go-to in terms of transformative agreements, OA, consortial, big deal packaging, et cetera. But GWILA serves for some purchases as well, or licensing as well. One of our members, I'll just be very brief, two more things. One of our members expressed concern about unbundling in tough financial times. If an institution commits to a large agreement but finds tough financial times, how easy is it to pull out of licensing? And that was a concern as well. And then also, there was a practical question as well about consortial, things like consortial manager within CRL, and can it be easier to navigate, et cetera. That was, I don't know if, I hear some chuckles, so maybe that was, other people have that same question. And then one last thing, mission identity. And this is a broad existential question, but relates to the various consortial or buyers club or whatever you want to term it, groups we already belong to. Are we reaching a point where we belong to so many organizations doing duplicative efforts that we have to really decide on what's best? And I did put a plug in for CRL. CRL does things obviously beyond licensing and negotiations, which I think are of service to our members.
Good morning, everyone. John Colshaw from Iowa. I feel like the whole room is back here. Sorry, guys. I think everything really was with the theme that Janet already mentioned. Lots of discussion about clarifying really where the CRL-NERL relationship is going, and especially how NERL can impact non-NERL CRL members. And again, we were a table where we had little NERL membership around the table, so a lot of call for trying to clarify that. We talked about making sure that access for smaller public state institutions isn't jeopardized if flagships were to join CRL-NERL deals. So remembering that sometimes we at flagship institutions are caring for others within our state. We only called out one thing under what CRL should stop, and I didn't hear Janet talk about that. Our comment there was that CRL should stop being simply reactive around licenses and maybe have more of a strategy, and I think that is sort of related to some of the things Janet said. And then finally here, so that someone else has opportunity to speak, I'll just say that we think it would also be great to emphasize the potential for members to leverage and take advantage of one-time deals, especially at the end of year, maybe focused on area studies and when might those deals be best, because not all members might be thinking about using a consortium to advantage one-time purchasing as opposed to recurring costs. So those are some things that we identified. Thanks.
Hi, Matthew Sheehy from Brandeis. I just wanted to say ditto. No, we did speak about a lot of the things that everyone else has mentioned, so not to go over it again, but a couple of different ideas that we had at the table was one, CRL might be able to help negotiate our collections going into the vendors. So there might be expertise that we can join and bring to the table so that we get better deals, because larger universities have this experience. Some of the smaller ones with unique collections might not have that experience. That was one. We also talked about value add. So maybe having cataloging or different parts of purchasing the collection. If you use CRL, you would have additional services that might be linked to it. So maybe there'd be records or discovery could be enhanced through CRL. So that might be something that we can do. And then I just want to emphasize it because we've talked a lot about it, but we did talk a lot about marketing and outreach and making sure that what makes CRL different? Why are we different than so many of the other consortium? And I've heard that from each of the speakers, but that's where it's a strong capital G ditto. So I think that's where we diverged a little bit.
I'm Cyan from the University of North Texas, and apologies if I say stuff that CRL does. It's just that you do so much and we don't know all of it. So you should continue evolving your model license. You should continue involving members in negotiating teams, and please continue opposing NDAs. You should stop negotiating read and publish and transformative agreements unless you're going to leverage your scale to transform the scholarly communications ecosystem. And then we want to echo the outreach. We want you to share what deals you're procuring, share what you're doing with Unsub, and maybe you could advocate for some data governance policy from publishers.
Okay, with that, thank you all for your discussion and for sharing some of your ideas and suggestions for CRL in the licensing space. At this time, we will begin a break. We'll ask everyone to return to this space at 11 o'clock for the next session. Good work.